Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says his department is helping evacuate Americans in the Middle East from countries caught up in the war with Iran, where commercial flights are not available. President Donald Trump met the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz at the White House. The president suggesting the U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran were because Iran was about to attack first. U.S. House and Senate will be voting in the next couple of days on a war powers resolution that, if it became law, would limit President Trump's authority to conduct military operations against Iran. Also today, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem testifies before the Senate Judiciary Committee for the first time since she suggested the actions of Renee Good and Alex Pretti, two anti-ICE protesters shot and killed by federal immigration officers in Minneapolis, appeared to be domestic terrorism. Supreme Court hears a challenge to a federal law that bans firearm possession by someone who uses or is addicted to illegal drugs. The plaintiff in the case said he smokes marijuana. And we'll preview C-SPAN's Campaign 2026 primary night coverage tonight of races in Texas, North Carolina, and Arkansas. CBS News writing the State Department says more than 9,000 Americans have returned to the U.S. from the Middle East over the past several days, including more than 300 from Israel. The department said the department is facilitating charter flights from the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan for American citizens and will continue to secure additional capacity as security conditions allow. Its statement said commercial flights remain available in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, and Egypt, and the department is actively helping American citizens book those tickets. That was from CBS News. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke about the assistance as he arrived on Capitol Hill for an all-senators and House members classified briefing on the war in Iran. He also spoke about reports the U.S. Embassy in Dubai was on fire.
The State Department is now actively, as it has been now for the last 72 hours, implementing our plans to help Americans in the Middle East be able to depart. As of a few minutes ago before I left, 9,000 Americans have been able to leave the region since the start of this war. We have about 1,500 Americans that are requesting assistance with departure. We have identified and continue to identify charter flights, military flight options, and expanded commercial flight options, meaning working with the airlines to send bigger airplanes with more seats, and the combination of those three things. The impediment we're facing now, in many cases, we've had a couple instances in which we have planes in the air and on the way, and unfortunately the airspace gets closed and they have to turn back around, so we're working through those challenges. Here's the message I want to deliver Americans who are in the Middle East and in need of assistance. It is very important, and I ask this of the networks as well. It is important for you to please put both the website and the phone numbers on your screens, because we need people. We need to know where you are. We need to know. We need to have contact information for Americans that need assistance. They have to register with us, because as these options begin to open up, and as they open up, we have to be able to call you. We have to be able to reach you. We have to be able to know where you're staying, so we can get this information to you and coordinate appropriately. And it'll be a variety of methods: charter flights, military flights and transports, expanded commercial opportunities, and in some cases land routes that will allow them to go to neighboring countries who might have open airports at that point. So it's a lot of different things here that need to happen in order to move people, but it all starts by knowing that you're there. It all starts by knowing that where you are and how we can get a hold of you. So I'm asking the networks and all of the media outlets, please publicize the two phone numbers that we've put out, as well as the website, so people can contact us and register. We've had, thousands of people call already. As I said, we've identified almost 1,600 that are requesting assistance with departure, but we need you to please be able to identify that. As I came in, I also saw the media reports about Dubai's consulate. The last update I had with seconds before getting before these cameras was that a drone unfortunately struck a parking lot adjacent to the Chancellery building and set off a fire in that place. All personnel are accounted for. As you're aware, we began drawing down personnel from our diplomatic facilities in advance of this. In the cases, for example, of Beirut, we basically drew down to bare bones, as well as in Baghdad and in Erbil and in a couple other posts as well. So we've been very fortunate, obviously, but our embassies and our diplomatic facilities are under direct attack from a terroristic regime.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio speaking to reporters on Capitol Hill as he was about to go into a classified briefing about the war in Iran. The website that he is referring to, step.state.gov, that's step.state.gov, and the phone numbers for people who want to get assistance overseas, 202-501-4444, Again, overseas 202-501-4444. And in the U.S. and Canada, it's 1-800-407-4747. A reporter asked Secretary Rubio today about what he had said on Monday when he was on the Hill to brief a smaller group of House and Senate leaders on the war in Iran. He said Monday, "We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces, and we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties." Again, that was from Monday. Here's the follow-up question today.
Yesterday, you told us that Israel was going to strike Iran, and that's why we needed to get involved. Today, the president said that Iran was going to get.
Yeah, your statement is false. So that's not what I was asked very specifically. Were you there yesterday?
Yes, I asked
Okay.
a question.
No, were you the one that? Because somebody asked me a question yesterday. Did we go in because of Israel? And I said, you were asking me that follow-up, and I said no. I told you this had to happen anyway. The president made a decision, and the decision he made was that Iran was not going to be allowed to hide behind its ballistic missile program, that Iran was not going to be allowed to hide behind its ability to conduct these attacks. That decision had been made. The president systematically made a decision to systematically destroy this terroristic capability that they had, and we carried that out. I was very clear in that answer. This was a question of timing, of why this had to happen as a joint operation, not the question of the intent. Once the president made a decision that negotiations were not going to work, that they were playing us on the negotiations, and that this was a threat that was untenable, the decision was made to strike them. That's what I said yesterday, and you guys need to play it. And if you're going to play these statements, you need to play the whole statement, not clip it to reach a narrative that you want to do, all right?
Secretary of State Marco Rubio talking to reporters on Capitol Hill. CBS News writing that President Trump is defending his decision to launch the war with Iran, saying in the Oval Office Tuesday that there would have been a nuclear war without intervention and that Iran, quote, would have taken out many countries. Also, Israel sent troops into Lebanon as the war widened, and some of Iran's Gulf neighbors warned that Iran's retaliatory fire could draw them into the spreading conflict. And Americans are being urged to leave 14 countries in the region because of serious safety risks. And the U.S. embassies in Beirut, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia are closed due to the conflict. 6 U.S. troops have been killed, hit by Iranian fire in Kuwait. The Iranian Red Crescent said at least 787 people have been killed in Iran. But reports inside the country suggest the toll is more likely in the thousands. That was from CBS News. Here's President Trump with reporters during a meeting in the White House Oval Office with the visiting German Chancellor Friedrich Merz.
Mr. President, did Israel force your hand to launch these strikes against Iran? Did Netanyahu pull the United States into this war?
No, I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack. If we didn't do it, they were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that. And we have great negotiators, great people that do this very successfully and have done it all their lives very successful. And based on the way the negotiation was going, I think they were going to attack first. And I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand. But Israel was ready, and we were ready, and we've had a very, very powerful impact because virtually everything they have has been knocked out now. Their missile count is going way down. Amazingly, they're hitting countries that were, let's call them neutral, right? They lived together for a long time. I think they were surprised. I was surprised. And now those countries are all fighting against them and fighting strongly against them. Someday they'll write a story and they'll say why they did that, but they hit countries that had nothing to do with what's going on. They were sort of leaving everything alone. All of a sudden they had missiles shot in, which shows you the level of evil that we're dealing with. They'll hit people that were actually at least somewhat friendly, and they had no problems with it. Also hitting only civilian places, hotels and apartment buildings. And we're hitting them where it is much more appropriate. We're hitting them very hard. And the big scale hitting goes now. They no longer have air protection. They no longer have any detection facilities at all left. And so they're gonna be in for a lot of hurt. These are bad people. These are people that killed. I guess it's 35,000. It's coming out 35,000 over the last 3 weeks. Protesters. 35,000 violently killed. So these are bad people, and the leader of the pack is gone. And as you know, 49 people were taken out in the first hit. And I guess there was another hit today on the new leadership, and it looks like that was pretty substantial also. So they're getting hit very hard, and we'll see what happens. A lot of people are coming forward. A lot of the people you would least suspect want to quit. They want to have immunity. They're asking for immunity, and probably at some point they'll be dropping, as you would say, laying down their guns. We'll see what happens. In the meantime, we're just continuing to go forward. Our military is the #1 in the world by far, and we are. Everything's big in my book. Venezuela was big. This is big. The original hit, Midnight Hammer, was big. Everything you view is big, but it's not considered very big by some standards, by some of our standards. We have a military like no other military that's ever been built.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office holding a news conference sitting beside the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who was asked about his country's position about this war with Iran.
You've called for unity and joint force in this moment against Iran. What does that look like to you? And then, Mr. President, where is getting a deal with Russia and Ukraine on your priority list right now?
So we, as I said, in Germany the last 2 days, we are supporting the United States and Israel to get rid of this terrible terrorist regime, and we are looking forward to a day after, and we have to talk about the strategy. What is following after this regime is away, and we have to strategize on this entire region. And we are having a high interest in common approach and common work and what we can do. And this is important not just for the Americans. This is extremely important for Europe and extremely important for Israel and their security. So we are really looking forward to find ways how to deal about the day after.
The German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in the White House Oval Office with President Trump. Politico reporting about this meeting. President Trump, who thanked Merz for having been very nice on the subject of Iran, lashed out at other European allies that have been less supportive, especially Spain. 15 American aircraft left 2 joint bases in southern Spain on Sunday after the country's president said his government would not partake in a war it considered a violation of international law. Trump said he told his Treasury Secretary to cut off all trade with the country, even though the U.S. trades with the entirety of the European Union, not Spain as an individual member, and suggested he could have violated Spain's sovereignty had he chosen to. Trump said, "We could just fly in and use it. Nobody's going to tell us not to use it, but we don't have to." But they were unfriendly. Political article goes on with Merz sitting by quietly. Trump also vented about British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who has been more critical of the Iran operation and has drawn the president's ire by refusing to allow the U.S. to use the joint Diego Garcia base in the Chagos Islands. Again, that was from Politico. Here's President Trump on the U.K.
By the way, I'm not happy with the U.K. either. That island that you read about, the lease, okay, he made it for whatever reason, he made a lease of the island. Somebody came and took it away from him. And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
President Trump in the White House Oval Office with the German Chancellor. The president was also asked about the worst-case scenario for the war with Iran. He said, "I guess the worst case would be we do this and then somebody takes over who's as bad as the previous person, right? That could happen." The president and the chancellor were also asked about the possible economic fallout from the war in Iran. Yahoo Finance reports that gasoline prices at the pump jumped on Tuesday in reaction to surging oil prices amid a widening Middle East war. For the past 24 hours, the national average at the pump rose by 10 cents to nearly $3.11 per gallon, according to AAA data. Reporting from Yahoo Finance, back to the White House Oval Office.
How worried are you that the rising prices for gas and oil are damaging the American economy and also Mr. Chancellor?
Yeah, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. This is, of course, damaging our economies. This is true for the oil prices and this is true for the gas prices as well. So that's the reason why we all hope that this war will come to an end as soon as possible, and we are hoping that the Israeli and the American army are doing the right things to bring this to an end and to have really a new government in place who is coming back to peace and freedom.
Yeah. Something had to be done, and it's been 47 years. They've been killing people all over the world for a long time. They were the kings and fathers of the roadside bomb. Soleimani, we killed him last term. If we didn't, I think it might be a different story today. They would have been much stronger and smarter than they are. But they did the roadside bombs. 95% of the people lost their legs, arms, had their face wiped out, just wiped out. I've seen some young people that it's so sad to watch. And that was almost all, 95% comes from Iran and with Soleimani. Soleimani loved his favorite weapon. He loved the roadside bomb. And when you see people walking around with no legs and no arms and a face that's been blown to hell, these people, what they have to go and the way they have to live, this is Iran. When you look at the barracks, the famous barracks, when you look at the hostages, when you look at a lot of hostages, when you look at all of the problems, they were really a purveyor of terror all over the world for many, many years. And it's something that had to be done, something. And I believe that if we didn't, because I see where Congress, you know, if I didn't do this, guys like Schumer, who are losers, the Democrats, they're losers. That's why they're not here. Guys like Schumer would say, well, you should have done this. In other words, if I did it, it's no good. If I didn't do it, they would have said the opposite, that you should have done this. But most people feel, I'll tell you what, I have never had more compliments on something I did. People felt it's something that had to be done. So if we have a little high oil prices for a little while, but as soon as this ends, those prices are going to drop, I believe, lower than even before.
President Donald Trump with the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in the White House Oval Office. Wall Street today, the Dow closed down 403, but at one point was down as much as 1,200 points. NASDAQ down 232, S&P down 64. President Trump on Monday formally notified Congress about the military action against Iran, consistent with the War Powers Act of 1973, language that presidential administrations use to signify they are complying with the law even though they believe it to be unconstitutional. And both the House and Senate expect to debate and vote this week on war powers resolutions to restrict the president's military operations in Iran. The Senate expected on Wednesday, the House a vote on Thursday. Also today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and General Dan Kane, Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, back on Capitol Hill to give classified briefings to all members of the House and Senate about the Iran war, a day after a smaller group of lawmakers were briefed. The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, was briefed and spoke today at a news conference.
Having been briefed now, not once but twice, there is no evidence that has been presented to us that the United States was under threat of imminent attack from Iran. Zero evidence of that. In fact, many members of the administration have actually publicly now admitted that. So if in fact that was the case, it's hard for the American people to understand the rationale from launching a preemptive war in the Middle East that has now spread to more than half a dozen countries and resulted in the death of at least 6 brave, courageous, heroic service members. That's unacceptable.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, Democrat from New York, at a news conference. He also expressed support for the War Powers Resolution, expected to be voted on this week.
Is there anything more that Democrats can do?
It's important for us to take the step that is in front of us right now, which is to work to make sure that the War Powers Resolution, which is bipartisan in nature, passes on the House floor today. Every member of Congress needs to go on record. This is a matter of the utmost significance that the framers understood would perhaps be the most important decision that members of Congress would make. And in fact, they decided that in our system, they don't want a king-like figure being able to unilaterally decide to send American men and women to war. That's why in Article 1 of the Constitution, this power was explicitly given to the Congress. And it's now the Congress's responsibility to go on record, because Donald Trump has unconstitutionally and illegally chosen to launch a war. He's describing it as a war. So-called Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, is describing it as a war. Other members of the administration are describing it as a war. And there's a requirement under the Constitution that it's members of Congress who make the decision as to whether to get us entangled in this kind of armed conflict. And that's what the resolution this week will be all about.
The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, at a news conference today, also holding a news conference and discussing the war in Iran and congressional authorization and the War Powers Resolution due up this week. Senator John Thune, the Majority Leader, Republican from South Dakota.
Do you think the Congress would need to authorize any military action against Iran beyond the 60-day or 90-day window?
No. I think the president has the authority that he needs to conduct the activities, the operations that are currently underway there. And as you know, there's a lot of controversy around, questions around the War Powers Act, but I think the president is acting in the best interest of the nation and our national security interests by ensuring that he's protecting Americans and American bases and installations in that region, as well as those of our allies.
The president has not ruled out boots on the ground. He has said that this could go on for a long period of time. 6 American service members have already been killed. Where is Congress? When does Congress weigh in?
Well, Congress obviously, as you know, has the power of the purse. The president has broad authorities under Article 2 of the Constitution when it comes to defending America's national security interest. And the authority that he is using is very similar to that used by President Obama in Libya, going back prior to that, previous administrations. So, obviously, I don't think the president probably is going to take options off the table. You don't want to telegraph to your enemies what you will or will not do. But I think that they are achieving great success with what they've done so far. And it's targeted, of course, at naval and air assets in that region that the Iranians currently possess, ballistic missiles that could do great damage to Americans and to our allies in the region. And so I think once that has been achieved, once those objectives have been achieved, there are a lot of questions about what happens next. And I think, frankly, that's going to be largely up to the Iranian people. But this will eliminate the threat that is posed that could kill countless numbers of Americans. There is no country in the world that has more American blood on its hands than Iran. So I think the president was perfectly within his rights to take the steps that he took. I think it was a necessary step in order to protect American lives.
Senator John Thune, the Majority Leader, Republican from South Dakota, speaking to reporters today in the U.S. Capitol building. This is Washington Today. Independent newspaper writing that President Donald Trump has dismissed criticism from major conservative media figures over his ongoing war against Iran, insisting that he is the real voice of MAGA. Amid dire polling numbers, talk radio host and former Fox News star Megyn Kelly said she had serious doubts about the airstrikes and questioned whether they were worth the deaths of multiple U.S. service members. Tucker Carlson has called the bombing campaign absolutely disgusting and evil, while mercenary magnate and Trump donor Eric Prince said he was not happy about the whole thing. But in an interview with independent D.C. newsletter The Inner Circle Monday night, the president declared that his base is still behind him. Referring to Kelly and Carlson, he said, "I think that MAGA is Trump. MAGA's not the other two. MAGA wants to see our country thrive and be safe, and MAGA loves what I'm doing, every aspect of it." Reporting from The Independent. Another critic, former Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican of Georgia, was interviewed by Megyn Kelly Monday night on her Sirius XM show.
Donald Trump has said repeatedly on camera and in interviews he doesn't think he's going to heaven. Well, I want to ask a question, a serious question. What is in his mind? What is his mental state? If he doesn't think he's going to heaven and he is a man towards the end, he's in the fourth quarter, he's towards the end of his life, How does that pan out for the rest of us when we have a president of the United States who doesn't think and is convinced he's not going to heaven? What does that mean his decision making is? He already said to the New York Post today that he doesn't care about the polling. He doesn't care about what the American people think, and he may put troops on the ground. He took this is going to be a few-day war, to now it's going to be maybe 4 weeks or more. I want to say, what is happening to the man that I supported, you supported, the man that denounced what happened in Iraq, the man that said no more foreign wars, no more regime change, promised it on the campaign. J.D. Vance promised it. Tulsi Gabbard promised it. All of them promised it. And we're a year in, and we're in another war, and we've got American troops being killed. I think it's time for America to rip the Band-Aid off, and we need to have a serious conversation about what the is happening to this country and who in the hell are these decisions being made for, and who is making these decisions.
Former Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, with the profanity removed from Monday's Megyn Kelly Sirius XM program. Punchbowl News writing that Pentagon Policy Chief Elbridge Colby faced scathing Democratic criticism Tuesday on the United States war against Iran as lawmakers teed off on the growing scope, evolving rationale, and seeming inconsistency between the campaign and stated Defense Department policy. Colby told an at times skeptical Senate Armed Services Committee that the administration's national defense strategy was wholly consistent with President Donald Trump's ongoing strikes against Iran, the fallout from which continues to spread across the Middle East. That's reporting from Punchbowl News, and here is Senator Jack Reed, Democrat from Rhode Island, the committee's ranking member, questioning Elbridge Colby.
The NDS specifically states that in the Middle East, the department, quote, will empower regional allies and partners to take primary responsibility for deterring and defending against Iran and its proxies, close quote. Furthermore, the NDS repeatedly states that while our allies will receive critical support from the U.S., it'll be much more limited. This national security strategy was published, by my count, about 39 days ago. So, Secretary Colby, the military operations unfolding in the Middle East are completely contrary to the strategy the department has put forth. Why has the department abandoned the strategy after 39 days?
Well, Senator, I'd completely reject that characterization, sir. If you look in the strategy, it details specifically not only the threat posed by Iran and ensuring that the president has the options to act against Iran first. Secondly, it also explicitly and repeatedly details that the strategy will provide the ability for the president to use particularly effectively air and maritime forces, standoff kind of or overhead kind of forces to do exactly this kind of operation, obviously things like Midnight Hammer. And then thirdly, I would say that we actually are, Senator, seeing a real example. Obviously, our Israeli allies are really leaning in, but we see that from our Gulf partners right now. We see it from other partners in Europe. So I don't think this is an invalidation at all, Senator.
Well, so our Gulf powers, our partners are taking primary responsibility as it's described in NDS?
Well, Senator, primary responsibility specifically refers in particular to the European context, the South Korean context. We're looking at Israel in particular. It's a general theme. It's a little bit more differentiated how we're talking about. We obviously want allies and partners throughout to be able to take responsibility, but you know, we're looking as a general. It's not a kind of straitjacket, if you will.
Did we notify our allies and partners, except Israel, of course?
I defer to the operational or other, the Department of State on that.
Mr. Secretary, I would assume that you would be vitally involved in that notification process. Did we notify our partners?
I have myself been on the phone with a number of ministers and sub-ministerial level since the outbreak of the operation on Saturday. So I know we've notified them. The exact timing, I defer to others more senior in the administration.
Thank you.
Senator Jack Reed, Democrat from Rhode Island, Armed Services Committee ranking member questioning Defense Undersecretary for Policy Elbridge Colby at today's hearing. Politico writing about it, Republicans also shared concerns about the administration's strategic priorities, namely Senate Armed Services Chair Roger Wicker, Republican of Mississippi. Wicker criticized the Pentagon's blueprint, saying it says little about our vital interests in the Middle East amid the war. He said this seems out of step with repeated military actions to deal with the ongoing threat with Iran. That was from Politico. Story from The Hill. Republicans are pointing to the U.S. attack on Iran in order to ramp up pressure on Democrats to fund the Department of Homeland Security. Democrats have demanded that the White House significantly overhaul its immigration enforcement tactics following the deaths of 2 U.S. citizens in Minnesota at the hands of federal agents, and they have refused to support any DHS funding legislation until those changes are made. But Republicans argue that the escalating conflict with Iran is heightening threats to the homeland, which makes it dangerous for the department to remain shut down. And they plan on bringing a DHS bill to the floor of the House on Thursday for a vote. This also came up with Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, questioning Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem at today's Judiciary Committee hearing.
We're engaged in military action against the mothership of terrorism, Iran, which I hope will sink pretty soon. Do you think the threat level against the United States is up or down when it comes to radical Islamic terrorists?
It's up.
It's up?
Yep.
So you mean they actually may want to come here and hit us because we hit them in Iran? I don't think you have to be, a general to figure that out. Mm-hmm. Is the Coast Guard without funding?
Portions of it. We're keeping some of the salaries paid, but they're...
So there's no funds in the appropriation bill for the Coast Guard. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Because your agency is not being funded. It's the one part of the appropriations bill where we haven't agreed on funding. Is that correct?
Correct.
So FEMA, no money, right? Coast Guard, no money. Really? Really? ICE, they have money because of the bill we did before. The Secret Service, are these people being paid?
Yes, they are.
They're being paid, but do we have money?
Our law enforcement is paid, but their resources, their administrative staff,
they're not being paid out of appropriated funds this year, right?
Correct.
So in the appropriations process, we've got no new money for the Secret Service. Does that make any sense to anybody in America? Can we not understand America is under siege now? Likely to be attacked because radical Islam is under siege and they're going to hit back. And we're sitting here looking at each other and not funding DHS? If you want to reform ICE, great. Count me in. If you want to make DHS more professional, count me in. If you want to investigate bad shootings, count me in. If you don't want to do away with sanctuary cities, count me out.
Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, questioning the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem at today's Judiciary Committee hearing. We'll have more from this hearing with Secretary Noem in just a moment as she gets questioned about federal immigration enforcement. Back in a moment with more Washington Today.
Tonight kicks off C-SPAN's Campaign 2026 primary coverage, live across the C-SPAN networks. First up, North Carolina and Arkansas, but all eyes are on Texas. The Lone Star State could decide the balance of power in Washington, shaping control of the U.S. Senate and influencing redistricting battles that could redraw America's political map for years to come. We'll also bring you high-stakes House and governor's races across all 3 states. Our live coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern. Watch as voters in Arkansas, North Carolina, and Texas head to the polls. Primary night on the C-SPAN networks. Every moment, every result, every speech. C-SPAN, bringing you democracy unfiltered.
Support for C-SPAN and C-SPAN Radio comes from Disney.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. New York Times reporting that Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, repeatedly declined on Tuesday to apologize for suggesting that 2 American citizens killed by federal immigration agents in Minneapolis, Renee Good and Alex Pretti, were domestic terrorists. Asked by Democratic and Republican senators about comments she made in the aftermath of both shootings that Ms. Good and Mr. Pretti had committed acts of domestic terrorism, Ms. Noem did not retract her words. She said repeatedly that her characterizations came from immigration officers in Minneapolis. That was from the New York Times. Here's one of the exchanges before the Judiciary Committee. Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, is the ranking member.
Secretary Noem, the nation has watched horrified as immigration agents killed Renee Good, Alex Pretti. In Chicago, one of your Border Patrol agents shot Miramar Martinez 5 times after ramming her car. You and your agency rushed to brand these victims as, quote, domestic terrorist. We have ample video evidence and eyewitness testimony proving you are wrong. Your statements caused immeasurable pain to these families. Let me give you an opportunity to do the right thing. Do you retract these statements identifying these individuals as domestic terrorists?
You know, Senator Dermott, when we have these situations happen, we always offer our condolences to those families, and I offer mine as well. These are tragic situations, and I can't imagine what these families go through in losing a loved one. What I will say is we always work to provide the American people with as much information as possible, that we're relying on reports from the ground and from agents that are there and working to be transparent, and we'll continue to do all that we can to provide the accurate information and the facts to people as we can.
Where did you get that information? In a recent hearing before the HISGAC committee, CBP and ICE officials testified under oath that their agencies did not inform you that Pretti was a domestic terrorist during that hearing, stated during that hearing.
I was getting reports from the ground from agents at the scene, and I would say that it was a chaotic scene, as you've seen in Minneapolis and St. Paul, as immigration enforcement has gone forward, and we've worked at targeting the worst of the worst, that many times our agents have been faced with violent
the victims of
protesters.
That violence domestic terrorists as a way to calm the scene?
These violent terrorists have put them in a situation where it's unprecedented what these agents have faced it. So that situation on the ground that day was chaotic, and it was something that they were transpiring and sharing information
brand them as domestic
with us.
Terrorists. Can you explain why you decided to brand these victims that we all saw on video, who were out protesting the activities of your agency and were killed as a result of it? How did you think that calling them domestic terrorists at that scene was somehow going to calm the situation?
You know, Senator, we are working in those situations where there's a tragic loss of life and that there is something that our agents are involved in, that we continue to deliver information.
Is it so hard to say you were wrong?
We continue, as these investigations continue to go, we will provide, I absolutely strive to provide factual information, and we'll continue to do that.
And when you fail, do you admit it publicly?
Absolutely. We always know that there's room for improvement, that we will.
Stop the clock, so.
Steve Porter Jr. and Dr. Linda Davis. They were Americans killed by ICE. You have not given their family any justice. Say their names. Their Black Lives Matter. Their Black Lives Matter.
Protester removed from the room after Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, questioned the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem at today's hearing. Story from Minnesota Public Radio. Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty said her office is investigating 17 alleged incidents of excessive force by federal immigration agents, and she's asking the public to submit tips and evidence. She said that filing any criminal charges against federal agents would be legally complex, but she's prepared to do it. That was from Minnesota Public Radio. TheHill.com writing about another exchange at today's Judiciary Committee hearing. Senator Thom Tillis, Republican of North Carolina, tore into Secretary Noem in a 10-minute tirade criticizing her from everything from handling of the deaths of 2 Minnesotans to killing her own dog, in a monologue that garnered applause from the audience of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Tillis said, "I'm giving you a performance evaluation here. I'm not looking for a response," adding that time after time after time, I've been disappointed. Tillis, who is retiring at the end of his term next year, accused Noem of holding up federal emergency funding, violating U.S. citizens' rights in carrying out immigration enforcement, and quashing independent oversight of her department in a move he said would prompt him to renew his hold on Homeland Security Department nominees. That was from The Hill. Here's a few minutes of Senator Tillis and Secretary Noem.
Who does Tom Homan work for? You or the president?
The president.
Okay. Why is that? Because I believe the president recognized that you weren't getting it done in Minneapolis, and you're putting us further away from pointing to this. We're beginning to get the American people to think that deporting people is wrong. It's the exact opposite. The way you're going about deporting them is wrong. The fact that you can't admit to a mistake, which looks like under investigation, is going to prove that Ms. Good and Mr. Pretti probably should not have been shot in the face and in the back. Law enforcement needs to learn from that. You don't protect them by not looking after the facts. Not only should the FBI be investigating it, but every single law enforcement agency in that jurisdiction should be invited to it, so our law enforcement officers do not have this pall cast upon them. One of the reasons why ICE officers are having threats, and damn the people that threaten ICE officers, because so many of them are doing a good job, is because you've cast a pall on them by acting like we should investigate things differently. Officer-involved shootings have a formula that we should go through every time. And we're not going through that formula. As a matter of fact, in Ms. Good's case, I think that they were even saying that maybe there wasn't even a need to do it in the DOJ. I hope that that's changed. But I'm telling you, it was a civil rights review. I saw your frown. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But originally, Blanche said there wouldn't be an investigation. Folks, law enforcement, we've got to have their back. We've got to make it clear when they make a mistake, then they get corrected for it. But you don't walk away from it, and you've done it too many times.
Senator Thom Tillis, Republican from North Carolina, at today's Judiciary Committee hearing, sitting in the witness seat, the Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem. Washington Post reporting today that Immigration and Customs Enforcement dramatically cut its basic training program amid a hiring spree meant to speed up the Trump administration's deportation efforts. Records obtained by the Washington Post show, corroborating a whistleblower's claim. From AL.com, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem defended her agency's use of a luxury jet with a bedroom in it and spending $220 million on ICE ads featuring her as she faced a bipartisan grilling Tuesday during a Senate oversight hearing. Here is that part of the hearing, beginning with Senator Whitehouse.
Could you explain this?
Sir, I'm looking at a picture of an interior, looks like a bedroom.
Of an airplane?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
You're not familiar with that?
These photos are not accurate. If you're referring to the airplanes that the Department of Homeland Security has purchased and are purchasing, we're using them for long-range command and control aircraft that is dictated in statute by Congress for the Department of Homeland Security to have a plane.
Luxury jet with a bedroom in it?
Yeah, we used a 737. I've been on it once, but it is being used by other administration officials, and it is used for command and control flights for the department. The department has found that in purchasing our aircraft, that we will save the taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars.
Does it have a bedroom in it?
In fact, we spent $1.42 billion on ICE deportation flights last year.
Does it have a bedroom in it?
I believe it's being refurbished and not having a bedroom in it. So it is being refurbished.
What kind of deportee justifies being flown out of the country in a luxury jet with a bedroom and accommodations like this?
There are aircraft being purchased that will be utilized for executive air travel and for deportations.
Well,
if you remember, in the past, we have used jets of this size and this configuration for deportations in the past. If you remember,
this configuration. By this configuration, you mean with a bedroom and luxury accommodations like this you've used for deportations. Is that true?
Sir, we have 737s that are being purchased by the department to replace contracts that we have on ICE deportations. That's what they're going to be used for. And in fact, the Coast Guard is the only entity within the Department of Homeland Security that has jets at this point in time. They had two G5s that were 20 to 25 years old that are being replaced so that they can continue to serve our Coast Guard and our military for years to come.
About these aircraft. They've been reported as saying, although they don't want to say publicly this, but individuals described as senior administration officials have described these airplane purchases as the world's worst deal and an abuse of federal funds. Can you tell me what the Republicans on this committee who voted for what I call the billionaires bill that gave you the money to buy these jets knew about your plans to acquire luxury jets when they voted for that money?
The dollars for these airplanes was appropriated by Congress. In fact, it's mandated from Congress and rules that you've given us that we need to have a long-range command and control aircraft that will seat up to 17 people in the Department of Homeland Security for national security purposes. We are complying with the law. Those planes are being refurbished and will be utilized for that, and they'll be utilized by members of the administration and other components.
First,
they will also cut our costs, sir, by almost 40%.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee, questioned by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat from Rhode Island. Today's hearing ran a total of 4 hours, and we covered it live on the C-SPAN networks. The video available at our website, cspan.org. This is Washington Today. Texas Tribune writing that Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, announced on Tuesday a new bill that he says will address the misuse of non-disclosure agreements in civil cases that cover up child sexual abuse and trafficking. The legislation, introduced as the Terminating Restrictive Enforcement of Youth Settlements, or TRACE law, is a bipartisan agreement led by Cruz and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat of New York, along with other Republican senators, including Katie Britt from Alabama and Eric Schmidt from Missouri. The bill is named in honor of Trey Carlock of Dallas, who died by suicide at 28 after a civil litigation process against Kanakuk Ministries in Branson, Missouri, brought back painful memories of sexual abuse. That was from the Texas Tribune. Senator Ted Cruz held a news conference in Washington.
After years of fighting to recover from abuse, Trey's settlement reminded him that his voice could be bought, that his story could be buried, that the price of compensation was silence. Trey once told his therapist, "They will always control me, and I'll never be free." Not long after, Trey died by suicide. He was only 28 years old. No child who has endured sexual abuse should be forced to carry that horror in silence. No child should be forced to walk alone in that pain. And no child should be forced to accept agreements that protect their abusers. In Trey's case, and in many others, non-disclosure agreements are used to shield the abusers. Children are the most vulnerable and precious members of our society. As legislators, as parents, and as human beings, we have a moral obligation to stand between them and those who would harm them. That's why today we're introducing Trey's Law. Trey's Law will protect, defend, and support children who are the victims of sexual assault. It ensures that non-disclosure agreements cannot be used to silence minors who have endured abuse. At the same time, the bill preserves the confidentiality of settlement amounts and allows victims themselves to insist on privacy if they so choose. It gives the victims the power. What it does not allow is the forced silencing of victims in order to protect the abusers.
Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, at today's news conference on Capitol Hill in Washington on the introduction of this bill. Axios writing today that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, once a Manhattan neighbor of Jeffrey Epstein, voluntarily agreed to an interview with the House Oversight Committee over past ties to the convicted sex offender, Axios has learned. Lutnick told Axios, "I look forward to appearing before the committee. I have done nothing wrong, and I want to set the record straight." Congressman James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, the Oversight Committee chair, quote tweeted the Axios article, adding, Secretary Lutnick has proactively agreed to appear voluntarily before the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. I commend his demonstrated commitment to transparency and appreciate his willingness to engage with the committee. I look forward to his testimony. The Supreme Court begins a CBS News article, seemed likely Monday to loosen a federal law that bars marijuana users from owning guns in a case that crossed typical political lines. Majority of justices appeared to lean toward a narrow ruling in favor of a Texas man who argued he shouldn't have been charged with a crime just because he owned a gun and smoked marijuana a few times a week. Trump administration asked the High Court to revive a criminal case against Ali Daniel Hemani under a law that bans all illegal drug users from owning guns. But both liberal and conservative justices seemed skeptical. That was from CBS News. Here's part of the oral argument. Justice Amy Coney Barrett questioning the Principal Deputy Solicitor General Sarah Harris, the justice using an analogy of a married couple who has one spouse with a prescription of the medication Ambien, but the other spouse is using it illegally.
I agree with you, and I think this is what Rahimi says, that legislatures can regulate to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. But when I look at this statute and when I look at what the qualifications are for being listed on one of these schedules, they're all about public safety, they're about reducing addiction. And the example that I just gave you about the Ambien is important to me because it's not the drug itself in this circumstance that's causing the dangerousness. It couldn't be, because if my husband has a prescription and I don't, what is it about Ambien itself that would make one of us more likely to be dangerous? It's not. It's the lawfulness. And so too here with the marijuana, I just don't see anything in the scheme that actually reflects Congress's judgment that this makes someone more dangerous.
Okay, let me help in a couple ways. One is, I think that there's two parts of this. One is the fact that the Controlled Substances Act scheduling scheme does consider the long-term effects of use, I think is important. I think that is important because it does reflect a determination that especially if you are regularly and routinely using these illegal drugs, there are serious side effects. I would point you to the Third Circuit's Harris decision when you look. If you think that there should be a more tailored assessment of who is dangerous, their questions are replicating the very questions that are being answered through the Controlled Substances Act regime. And second of all,
the Third Circuit's not Congress, and nothing about the scheduling process suggests that the Attorney General or his delegee has to make a decision that a drug, that the psychological effects, I agree with you, everyone would say that any drug can have long-term psychological effects. But there's no indication that that's what was motivating the Attorney General or Congress. This just wasn't about, the Gun Control Act just wasn't about dangerousness. It wasn't something that the legislature thought it needed to consider then.
Respectfully, I think these are on all fours with respect to considering dangerousness. In the Gun Control Act, the fact that it's habitual users or addicts, and I think under the theories that are being floated, you would have a real problem justifying even disarmament of addicts under G3, because I think that it's reflecting a determination that frequent and habitual use of illegal substances, not only above and beyond the determinations that are made to schedule them, but potential involvements of the illegal drug trade are a real problem.
Sarah Harris, Principal Deputy U.S. Solicitor General, questioned by Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett in the case U.S. v. Hemani, argued Monday the issue whether a federal law that prohibits the possession of firearms by a person who is unlawful user of or addicted to any controlled substance violates the Second Amendment of the Constitution. NBC News writing about the oral argument includes this. Hunter Biden, the son of former President Joe Biden, was convicted under the same law in June 2024 before being pardoned by his father. Voters in Texas, North Carolina, and Arkansas are casting ballots today to kick off campaign 2026 primary season. And tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, C-SPAN will begin its live coverage of the results, victory and concession speeches, analysis from political reporters, and your phone calls. One of the closely watched races is for U.S. Senate in Texas. On the Republican side, incumbent John Cornyn is being challenged by State Attorney General Ken Paxton and Congressman Wesley Hunt. C-SPAN spoke this morning with David Weigel, Semaphore Politics reporter, about this race.
President Trump has not endorsed.
He has not endorsed, and there are three candidates running. They all canceled their schedules to be with Trump on Friday. He didn't really do anything for the candidates as they showed up. But there's Senator John Cornyn, who is seeking a fifth term. It would end when he's celebrating his 80th birthday if he wins it. And Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, who is a reliable Trump ally, which has helped. He was the leader of the state AG's effort to overturn the 2020 election unsuccessfully. Paxton has run against Cornyn as a disloyal Republican who has not been, who did not want Trump to run again in 2024. He's criticized some of the compromises he's made with Democrats. There's an ad where he points out that Cornyn has worked with Crockett. And Crockett will point this out, that she could actually work across the aisle sometimes. In Paxton's view, we're a red state, we're a pro-Trump state. You need a loyal senator who's going to work with the president. There's also Wesley Hunt, the congressman from the Houston area, in the race. His argument is that, unlike Ken Paxton, who was impeached and survived in the Texas State Senate, who is an affair that he had an affair that he does not deny, Wesley Hunt's argument is that I'm an upstanding citizen and a veteran and a man of faith who is a loyal Trump Republican. And Republicans have spent more money than in this Texas Senate race than any to defend John Cornyn, more than $80 million. It started with ads defending Cornyn and attacking Paxton. They ran some at the end attacking Hunt, just as somebody who doesn't show up and support the Trump agenda. They want a runoff, which would be 10 weeks, where, well, they want to win. But what is more likely is that they would get a runoff between Cornyn and Paxton. Would Trump weigh in on that? And this is a factor throughout every Texas race we're talking about that's competitive. The key factor is, did Donald Trump endorse you or not? Have you said something in the past or cast a vote in the past that was anti-Trump? If that's the case, then you're in trouble.
What did Mr. Paxton get impeached for?
He had staff that claimed that he was, it's very technical to the detail, get all the details, but staff that claimed he was basically taking bribes. It was unrelated to his marital situation, but he was indicted in Travis County, liberal county where Dallas is, throughout his tenure. He's elected in 2014, and he is embroiled by scandal. He almost loses his reelection in 2018. But basically, he had staff leave his office, turn on him, and said he was corrupt. Republicans, enough Republicans in the state house agreed with that. A lot of the Republicans who voted to impeach him over these bribery allegations from former staff lost their primaries in 2024. Because Paxton campaigned against them. And so Paxton's very confident, his supporters are very confident that the base believes that allegations made against him by whoever they were are just like allegations made against Donald Trump. If you're Republican, that means they're not real. That he is so effective and he's so conservative and he's so MAGA that people are making stuff up about him. Is that what the record shows? Not really, but that is a consistent thing I heard from Republicans in Texas. Trump vouched for this guy, not in this race, but he's endorsed him before. He fought for Trump when it was hard. Therefore, I don't believe anything the establishment, quote unquote, says about him.
David Weigel, Semaphore politics reporter on C-SPAN's Washington Journal program this morning. Join C-SPAN tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern for primary night coverage from Texas, North Carolina, and Arkansas. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. Remember to sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the latest in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.